Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Clifford May, founder and president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Clifford, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be with you, Brittany.
It is good to be with you because negotiations between Hamas and Israel are ongoing and they're reportedly promising. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reportedly told NBC that we are, quote, closer than we've ever been, and emphasized, quote, it's very close and we are very hopeful that we get it over the finish line finally after all this time. And what we're talking about is a hostage release and ceasefire deal. So, can you talk to us about the state of negotiations? Where exactly are we?
Well, first, I think it's important to understand what these negotiations are all about. We're talking about hostages, innocent civilians who have been taken and pulled into tunnels, into dungeons. They've not been allowed to see the Red Cross. Some have been tortured. Many have been killed. We think maybe 33. I don't could come back in the first group. We don't really know how many are alive. In exchange for that, there would be a ceasefire, and there would be also convicted terrorists released from Israeli prisons. Probably not to Gaza, maybe some to the West Bank, more likely to Qatar, Turkey, or some other third country. Um, what we believe that we know is that the Israelis have signed off on the agreement as it is, and that Hamas will be thinking about it and making a decision sometime over the next few hours of whether they accept it. What Hamas has done many times in the past, over the past year or so, is to say, yeah, this is fine, but we have three more demands. And then nothing comes of it. So while everybody is hopeful, keep that in mind. The Israelis very much want this. Biden wants this in his tenure. Trump wants this before he comes into office. So there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. How much pressure on Hamas? Who knows? Who puts pressure on Hamas? Perhaps the Qataris. They may say this is the best deal you're going to get. So I can tell you more about what we know about the deal, but that's sort of the state of play as we understand it.
Before we get into what exactly is in this deal, I've talked with analysts from the FDD for 15 months since October 7th, and Hamas and Israel have been to the table many times, and there's been negotiations. There's been a temporary ceasefire, even, but there has not been a permanent ceasefire release of all the hostages. So, what do you think makes talks different this time around?
I think talks are different on this time around only because we're about to have a transition from one president to another here in the US. I think also very important is I think that Hamas now sees things have not gone quite the way they expected when they launched this war on October 7th, 2023, by invading Israel and staging a barbarous pogrom that included multiple rapes, multiple murders, killing children, all of that. Why did it not go this as they expected? Well, at this point, Hezbollah in Lebanon, which began bombing Israel the day after October 7th, October 8th, has been decimated. Hamas may have two brigades out of 24 that remain. We're not sure of that. Certainly, they don't have the weaponry they had. They probably lost 17,000 terrorists. That's about half the people who've been killed in Gaza are probably terrorists. These numbers can't be exact, but I think those are reasonable estimates by people who are fairly expert in this field. It's also true that the Islamic Republic of Iran can't support Hamas the way it was once hoped. Why? Because after the Islamic Republic of Iran launched drones and missiles at Israel, Israel fired back, destroyed missile defense systems, destroyed a lot of the rockets. The Islamic Republic of Iran is now vulnerable. Finally, the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria has fallen. This was essentially a colony of Iran. It no longer is. And the Israelis very quickly went into Syria during this kind of revolution and knocked out 80–90% of the military assets that were in Syria, the Navy, the Air Force, all of that. So the new government in Syria doesn't have any of that. So Hamas does see they have a very weakened position. They don't have anyone backing them. Maybe they think, hard for me to read their mind, how long do we want to stay in these tunnels with our hostages? Do we want to get out and go to some other country, which could be part of the deal? We haven't heard that, but could be. Or are we going to just stay here and continue to pop out of the tunnels and shoot Israelis when we can, and for as long as it lasts, and just hope that all the protests at the UN and on Columbia University and Harvard will eventually force Israel to back down and let us take over Gaza again.